This happened in 2017, but I still think about it way too often. I've only ever told a few friends because I know how it sounds, and because I don't really want to think too hard about what might have happened if we'd stayed the night. For context, I used to be a pretty avid backpacker. I've done a lot of trails in the western US, but this story takes place during a trip to the Olympic National Park in Washington. My friend Chris and I were doing a 5-day loop, mostly off-grid, using a series of primitive shelters marked along the route. If you've ever hiked the Olympic backcountry, you know it's dense. Moss-covered trees, minimal sunlight even at midday, and a weird, persistent silence broken only by distant water or the occasional crow. We were maybe 3 days in, deep in the Hoh rainforest when this happened. It was late afternoon when we reached one of the trail shelters, basically a 3-sided wooden lean-to with a raised roof and floor. These are pretty common in remote hiking areas and usually have a metal box with a logbook inside so hikers can sign in, leave notes, weather warnings, whatever. We'd planned to stay there for the night. It was the only structure for miles, and we hadn't seen another person in over 24 hours. The second we stepped up onto the platform, I knew something felt wrong. There was no obvious sign of trouble, nothing damaged, no gear left behind, but the moment I ducked inside, I felt it in my chest, that low buzz of unease that you can't quite name. Chris felt it too. He stopped halfway through unpacking and said, "You getting a weird vibe, or is it just me?" Definitely not just him. Still, we chalked it up to fatigue, or maybe just the heavy atmosphere of the place. The shelter faced a small clearing with a fire ring and a log bench, and behind it, the forest just swallowed everything. Thick green walls of moss and trees, no real visibility past 15 or 20 feet. I went to check the logbook. Standard spiral-bound journal in a rusted ammo box. I opened it, expecting entries about trail conditions or someone's dumb doodles. Most of the entries were normal. 9/12. Rainy, trail muddy, heading south. No bear sightings. 9/10. Stayed here with the dog. Quiet night. Firewood low. 9/8. Storm came in fast. Shelter held up fine. But the last one, dated the day before, was different. Scrawled hastily in heavy pencil across a single line, it said, "He followed me here." That's it. No date, no name, no follow-up, no next entry. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I even flipped a few pages forward to make sure I hadn't missed a second part. Nothing. Chris saw my face and asked, "What's it say?" I handed it over. He read it, closed the book, and very calmly said, "We're not sleeping here." Now, we're not the paranoid type. We've camped in places with bear tracks, heard wolves howling nearby, even had a guy try to rob us once near Flagstaff. But this was different. This wasn't fear of wildlife or some tangible threat. This was the feeling of being watched, and we couldn't shake it. We decided to push on, even though the sun was starting to dip. According to the map, there was a riverside clearing about 1.5 miles ahead. No shelter, but enough space to pitch our tent. We packed fast and left the logbook exactly where we found it. As we walked, the forest got darker in a way that it does when everything's soaking up the light. We kept hearing soft cracks behind us, twigs snapping, branches shifting. Every time we stopped to listen, it stopped too. Eventually, Chris muttered, "I don't think we're alone." I didn't say anything, because I agreed. We made it to the clearing just as the sky started turning dark blue. We didn't cook dinner, didn't start a fire, just set up the tent in silence, both of us facing the tree line, listening. Nothing came out of the woods, but that didn't mean nothing was in them. I barely slept. Every rustle, every breeze through the trees sounded like footsteps, I kept thinking about the way that sentence was written. Hurried, sharp. He followed me here. Not a bear. Not someone following me. Just he. Like the writer assumed the reader would know. Who was he? And did he leave? The next morning, we packed up at dawn and booked it down the trail. No breakfast, no coffee. We passed 2 hikers going the other way around at 11 a.m. And I almost said something about the shelter, but I didn't want to sound insane. What was I going to tell them? Watch out for some guy in the woods who maybe followed someone a day before us. Instead, we warned them that the shelter felt off and that there were better camping spots ahead. They nodded and kept walking. I still wonder about them sometimes, if they made it out okay, if they stayed the night and saw or heard anything, if they added to the logbook. When we got back to the trailhead 2 days later, I stopped in at the ranger station to file a wildlife report, standard procedure. Before leaving, I asked casually if anyone had mentioned anything strange near the Hoe Backcountry shelter. The ranger looked up and raised an eyebrow. Like what? I just shrugged. Odd noises, weird vibe, that kind of thing. She hesitated, then said, "You're not the first to ask." She wouldn't say more than that. For months after we got home, I kept checking backpacking forums to see if anyone had mentioned that shelter or the logbook. Nothing. And then, maybe 6 months later, I saw a thread buried in a forum for Pacific Northwest hikers where someone talked about finding a damaged logbook in a trail shelter near the Olympic coast. The entries had been torn out, but the last visible one said, "He's still out there." That was it. I didn't reply, didn't bookmark it. I wish I had. But I saw it, and it matched the handwriting in my memory. I haven't been back to that park since. I still hike, still camp, but I vet every shelter now. I carry a Garmin. I trust my gut, and I always read the logbooks. Every single page. I've never posted on Reddit before, but I've lurked for years, and I always read these creepy outdoors threads like it's my religion. This happened in 2021. I haven't told many people, mostly because saying it out loud somehow makes it feel less real, but it's stuck with me ever since. This isn't a ghost story, nothing supernatural, no Bigfoot, no skinwalkers, but I still get goosebumps when I think about it, because he was real. I saw him, heard him speak, and I have no idea what the hell he was doing out there. For some background, I live in the UK now, but I grew up in Oregon. I spent most of my 20s hiking and wild camping all over the Cascades and parts of the Rockies. Solo trips were my thing, not because I'm some kind of woodsman badass, but because I like the solitude. I do 3 to 5 day backpacking loops, nothing too extreme, usually sticking to marked but remote trails. This happened on a trip in the Wallowa Mountains, eastern Oregon. If you know them, you know it's a stunning area. Alpine lakes, high passes, wide open meadows, and very, very quiet. Even in peak season, some trails see almost no traffic. I planned a 4-day loop hitting several lakes, Aneroid Lake, Jewett, and a few smaller ones deeper in. I started midweek to avoid weekend traffic. On day 3, I'd camped at a spot near an unnamed alpine tarn about 9 miles from the trailhead. I hadn't seen a soul since day 1. It was late morning, sun was high, sky clear, but still cool in the shade of the forest. I just packed up and was descending a switchback trail that led through thick pine before opening up into a wider ridge with panoramic views. A quiet morning. No wind or noise at all. I rounded a bend and saw a man coming toward me. maybe 100 feet ahead. Right away, I noticed something was off. He wasn't carrying anything. No pack, no water bottle, not even a day bag. He was barefoot, and the wallow was on granite and dirt and shale. Just shorts and a thin, sweat-darkened t-shirt. I immediately stopped. When you're deep in the backcountry and you see another person, it's usually a relief. A nod, a good morning, sometimes even a brief chatter about trail conditions. But this guy? Something in me braced. I wasn't even scared yet, just alert. He kept walking toward me like nothing was unusual. We passed each other in one of the narrower parts of the trail. As he got close, I opened my mouth to ask, "Are you all right?" But he spoke first. He looked at me right in the eyes and said, "I'm almost done." That's it. No expression, no pause, just that. Then he walked past me and kept going. His feet were filthy, cracked and bleeding at the heels, toenails broken. There were scratches on his shins, like he'd been running through undergrowth. But he didn't look panicked or hurt, just empty, hollow. His face wasn't gaunt, but there was something about it that looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were sunken, skin drawn tight, like he'd been out there too long. But it's his voice that stuck with me. Not tired, not relieved, just flat, no inflection, like he was stating a fact. "I'm almost done." I turned to watch him as he walked away. He didn't turn back. I debated turning around. Honestly, for a solid minute, I stood there, trying to decide if I should follow him, try to figure out if he needed help. But here's the thing, I wasn't a beginner. I knew what it looked like when someone was in distress, lost, dehydrated, or mentally unwell. And this guy didn't look like any of those things. He looked like someone who had decided something, or maybe like someone who didn't belong out there to begin with. I don't know how else to describe it, but everything in my gut told me, do not go after him. So I didn't. I hiked out that day instead of staying the extra night I'd planned. I didn't feel scared exactly, but I was shaken, unsettled in a way I'd never experienced before. On the trail back, I passed a couple in their 40s heading in. I told them they might see another hiker coming out, described him briefly, barefoot, no pack. They just frowned. "You sure he wasn't with someone?" the woman asked. I shook my head. Definitely alone. We said goodbye and kept moving in opposite directions. I never found out if they saw him. When I got back to my car, I drove straight to the nearby ranger station. I felt dumb walking in and saying, "Hey, I saw a guy with no shoes on," but I needed to get it off of my chest. To their credit, the ranger I spoke to took me seriously. He wrote down what I saw, asked the usual questions, time, location, physical description. I mentioned the phrase, "I'm almost done." He looked at me and asked, did he sound like he wanted to end it all? I told him honestly, I don't know. He didn't sound like anything. The ranger said they'd send someone to check the area in the morning. I never heard back. I've run through every scenario in my head. He was a trail runner who'd lost his gear and was trying to get out. But why barefoot? And where's the urgency? He was mentally ill. Maybe schizophrenic or in psychosis. Possible. But again, there was no agitation, no confusion. He was eerily calm. Maybe he was done with life, hiking out to disappear or die somewhere. It's the one that fits the best. But even that doesn't explain why someone would choose that trail, that remote, barefoot. Or maybe he was just a guy who snapped. Whatever it was, I think I crossed paths with him at the very end of something. A breakdown. A long, slow unraveling. I think he meant what he said. He was almost done. And I truly hope he made it out. Or, if that wasn't the plan, I hope he found what he was looking for. But the weirdest part, you'd think the creepiest thing was seeing him, or the blood on his feet, or the dead look in his eyes. But what I remember most vividly was the moment after he passed me, when I realized I hadn't heard him approaching at all. No footsteps, no snapping twigs, just silence until I looked up, and there he was. That, and the quiet certainty in his voice. This happened back in 2018, but it still feels like it just happened yesterday. I've been reading a lot of hiking stories lately, and figured it was time to tell mine. Maybe someone else has had a similar experience. Back then, I just turned 30. I was single, in decent shape, and had gotten into solo hiking as a way to clear my head. Nothing too extreme, just long day hikes, usually in the Lake District. But in 2018, I decided to go bigger. I booked a week off work, packed up my gear, and headed to Scotland to hike a stretch of the Great Glen Way. I was doing it alone, not uncommon, especially in late summer when the trail's busy enough to feel safe, but also quiet enough to feel like you're really out there. The weird thing didn't happen on the Great Glen Way, though. It happened when I strayed off of it. It was the 4th day of the hike. I'd left my accommodation near Loch Ness in the morning and made a really good time. The weather was perfect, overcast but dry, mid-teens Celsius, barely any wind. One of those Scottish days that feels like the wind's holding its breath. I'd reached my planned stopping point by 3 p.m., but I wasn't tired and had plenty of daylight left. There was a forest track leading off to the right, marked only by a weathered wooden gate and a no vehicle sign. I checked my OS map and saw that it led to an old fire road that looped back around to the main trail. It would add maybe 2 hours to my route. I figured, why not? Famous last words. At first, the detour was lovely. No one else around, just thick pine woods and the soft crunch of gravel under my boots. The trees were dense, but the path was clear. An old forestry road with ruts and overgrowth, but nothing difficult. I remember it being very quiet. No birdsong, no wind. Just my footsteps and the occasional creak of branches. About 40 minutes in, I noticed a change. It wasn't anything obvious, just a shift in the mood, if that makes sense. The trees got denser, taller, the light thinner. The air smelled different, less fresh pine, more damp moss, and something faintly sour, like wet stone. I started to feel observed, not in a dramatic horror movie way, more like I'd walked into a room where someone had just stopped talking. I told myself I was overthinking it. Then I saw the man. He was maybe 30 feet off the trail, between the trees. I almost missed him. He was standing completely still, just there, like a statue, head slightly tilted downward, facing away from me. He looked like he was watching something on the forest floor, or listening, or maybe thinking. I stopped walking instinctively. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there. I called out, "Hey, mate, you all right?" No answer. Now, I'm not the kind of person who gets spooked easily. I've helped injured hikers before, talked to people wild camping off trail. There are all sorts of reasons someone might be in the woods, but there was something about the way this guy was standing that immediately put me on edge. He wasn't leaning or crouched. He was perfectly upright, arms at his sides, feet together, like he'd been planted there. His clothes were plain, a dark green jacket, brown trousers, nothing flashy, no gear, no bag, no visible reason to be that far out in the trees. He didn't acknowledge me at all. I took a step closer and repeated louder, "You okay, man?" Nothing. Not even a flicker. He didn't turn, didn't nod, didn't even shift his weight. And that's when I felt it. That gut-deep animal sense that something was wrong. You know how your brain starts to explain things, even when your instincts are screaming. Mine was doing that in overdrive. Maybe he was hard of hearing. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was, I don't know, meditating. It all felt ridiculous, even as I thought it. I stopped moving, backed up a step. And that's when he tilted his head. Just a little, just enough to let me know he'd heard me. He still didn't turn around, but that was enough. I backed away slowly, then turned and walked. Not fast. I didn't want to spook him, but steady. Focused. Phone in hand, no signal of course, eyes on the trail, ears turned for any sound behind me. I never heard footsteps. I didn't stop until I hit a fork in the track and got back to a more open, visible stretch of trail. I didn't see him again, never heard anything behind me. I rejoined the Great Glen Way about an hour later, rattled, but trying to act normal. I told myself he was just a weird hiker, or someone dealing with mental health issues, or maybe just messing with me. But even as I thought that, I knew better. That wasn't just someone being weird. That was someone standing still for far too long in a place that made no sense, completely unresponsive, until I was about to leave, and then showing me just enough that he knew I was there. Like it was a performance, or a warning. I spent that night at a bothy, where I met a friendly older walker from Edinburgh who knew the trails better than me. I ended up telling him about the strange encounter. He asked where it happened. I showed him on the map. He made a face, and then he said, I've heard things about that area. Forestry land, old hunting estate. They say there's stuff buried out there. World War II training grounds, old bunkers, things they never cleared. Places not on the official maps. I laughed it off, but he didn't. He just said, some folks say there are corners of these woods where people disappear. Not all at once. Just stop being seen. That was the end of the conversation. I finished the hike, didn't take any more detours, kept on the trail. I carried a torch at all times. I never saw anyone else like that, never felt that way again, like I was being studied, measured, and deemed not worth responding to. I still hike, still love the solitude, but I've never gone back to that part of the trail. I even looked at a satellite map recently to try and find that fire road. It's there, faint, overgrown. It doesn't show up on most trail maps. It just vanishes into a dense patch of forest. I don't think I want to know what's at the end of it. This happened a couple of summers ago, while I was solo hiking in Sweden. Just minding my own business, trying to unplug from city life and clear my head. Sweden has these awesome little three-sided wooden shelters, scattered along hiking trails, and they're free to use, really chill. Anyway, I'd been walking all day, my legs were toast, and I came across one of these shelters near a lake deep in the forest. Perfect spot. It was quiet, beautiful. The whole area smelled like pine and moss. I set up my sleeping bag inside, threw my backpack under my head, and just listened to the trees creaking and the birds doing their thing. It was getting late, like around 11 p.m. Still kind of light out because Swedish summers are weird like that. Long-ass twilight. I was drifting off when I heard footsteps come down the trail. Not animals, people. 3 of them showed up, 2 men and a woman. Middle-aged, looked like serious hikers or locals, all wearing those bright neon safety vests like they were on some kind of mission. One of the guys comes up to the shelter with a flashlight. and just kinda stares at me. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I sat up, trying not to look like a deer caught in headlights. Camping. Just hiking through." He nodded slowly, still kind of eyeing me like I was doing something shady. Then the woman spoke up. "There have been some strange people around here. We're part of a neighborhood watch, just making sure everyone's safe." "Strange people." Yeah, cool, thanks. Definitely what I wanted to hear right before sleeping alone in the woods. She explained that someone had gone missing a couple of weeks earlier. A guy who was camping not far from here. They found his tent and stuff, but no trace of him. He was just gone. Apparently some locals had also reported seeing a weird man hanging around the lake. Not a hiker, not a local, just some creepy lurker guy. They didn't stay long. Gave me that "you do you, but we warned you" look, and headed off down the trail with their flashlights bouncing. So now I'm lying there, wide awake, staring into the trees like they're gonna sprout arms and grab me. I tried to chill, told myself it was probably just locals being extra cautious. I mean, I've done solo hikes before. People get weird about it. Eventually, I dozed off. And then, at around 1 or 2 a.m., dead in the middle of the night, I woke up again. No sound woke me up. It was more like this sudden feeling that something was off. You know when your brain starts pinging danger, but you can't figure out why. I kept still and listened. Footsteps, soft, slow ones, coming from the direction of the lake. I sat up a bit, trying not to make a sound. The moon was really bright that night, like almost full moon bright, and everything was lit up in a silver blue. I saw movement between the trees, and out walks this old guy, alone, naked. I'm not joking. No shirt, no pants, not even socks. Just full grandpa mode, letting it all hang out. Pale skin glowing in the moonlight. I swear it looked like something out of a dream, or a really specific nightmare. He wasn't drunk or stumbling. He just walked with this weird, loose-limbed shuffle, like he didn't quite know how to move his body. His head was tilted slightly, and he was muttering something under his breath. I couldn't make out the words. At first, I thought he hadn't seen me, but then he turned, and we locked eyes. I cannot stress enough how uncomfortable that moment was. I was halfway out of my sleeping bag, frozen in place. The guy just stared at me, totally unfazed that he was buck naked in the middle of the woods. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't angry, it wasn't scared. It was disappointed, like I'd crashed his party or broken some unspoken forest rule. We stared at each other for what felt like a full minute. Then, without a word, he turned around and slowly walked back into the woods, his saggy ass disappearing into the trees. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just sat there in my sleeping bag with my camping knife clutched in my hand, like it was going to do anything. At first light, I was out. I packed up in like 3 minutes. I didn't even stop to make coffee. I practically ran back to the nearest village. I told a ranger about it later that day. I figured he'd laugh at me or tell me I was overreacting. Instead, he just nodded and said, "Yeah, people have seen him before." Sorry, what? He said there have been a bunch of reports over the years. Strange men, naked or half-naked, seen wandering the woods at night near the lake. Sometimes staring, sometimes talking to themselves. One hiker claimed the guy tried to lead him somewhere. Another one said he disappeared into the lake without leaving a ripple. I asked if they ever found the missing camper. The ranger shook his head. I haven't been back to that part of Sweden since. I still love hiking, but I've become a lot more picky about where I sleep. No more 3-sided shelters. I want 4 walls, man. Doors, locks. So yeah, Next time someone tells you the forest is peaceful and healing, just remember, it could contain moonlit wiener-waving forest ghouls who will judge your life choices with their cold, haunted eyes. Happy camping. This happened a couple of years ago in the summer of 2021. For context, I live in Salt Lake City and spend a lot of time outdoors. Day hikes, backpacking, winter camping, you name it. I've been in some strange situations before, but nothing like this. This one stuck with me in a way I still don't totally understand. It was a weekend trip in late July. My friend Wes and I had planned a 2-night backpacking loop in the Uintas, starting from the Crystal Lake trailhead, heading up to Long Lake, and then following a less traveled loop past West Lake and down through some smaller ponds. Not totally off-grid, but far enough to avoid crowds. We both had plenty of backcountry experience. I was 31 at the time. Wes was 29. We had bear spray, a Garmin in reach, topo maps, and decent weather. Blue skies, mid-70s during the day, and maybe low 40s at night. Pretty much perfect. We set off Saturday morning, hiked in about 6 miles, and set up camp near a small, unnamed lake that didn't show up on most trail apps, but was clearly visible on USGS maps. No other tents in sight, which is rare out there, even in the less popular areas. Honestly, we were stoked about that. We ate dinner, freeze-dried chili and instant mashed potatoes. We watched the sky go orange and purple, and turned in at around 10:30. I remember how clear the stars were that night. It was dead quiet. No wind, just stillness in the air. That changed at around 3 a.m. I woke up suddenly, like my body knew something was wrong before my brain caught up. At first, I thought I'd heard a coyote or maybe a fox, but it didn't sound right. It wasn't the short yip or bark I was used to hearing from coyotes. This was a scream, and it sounded human. I sat up in my tent and listened. About 30 seconds later, I heard it again. Loud, sharp, definitely female sounding, but weirdly strained, like someone trying to scream through a sore throat. It echoed off the trees and across the lake. Wes unzipped his tent and whispered, "Dude, are you hearing this?" "Yeah," I said. "You think it's an animal?" We listened. Exactly 30 seconds later, another scream. Same sound, same intensity. No movement, no variation. It wasn't getting closer or further away. It wasn't circling. It wasn't natural. Wes said, "That's not an animal. No way." And I agreed. We got out of our tents, but kept our headlamps off. The moon was bright enough that we could see the tree line. The sound was coming from the other side of the lake, but the trees made it impossible to see anything. We stood there in the dark, barely breathing, as the scream came again, sharp and blood-curdling, exactly 30 seconds later. It was like a broken record, playing over and over, every 30 seconds on the dot. We tried calling out, "Hello, is someone okay?" But no response, just the scream again, louder and more desperate this time. We stayed frozen for what felt like forever, maybe 45 minutes, until the screaming suddenly stopped. Complete silence. Neither of us slept again. We packed up as quickly as we could before dawn, eating cold jerky and granola bars. By first light, we were hiking back out, still shaken and glancing over our shoulders the entire way. We told the ranger at the trailhead what happened. He didn't look surprised. He said, "You're not the first to report that. People hear the scream every year or so, usually around the same time. Late summer, early morning. No one ever finds the source. We checked the area multiple times, but it's like it disappears. He shrugged and added, "Sounds like someone trying to imitate a person." We left it at that. To this day, I've tried to come up with a rational explanation. Was it an animal? Maybe. Mountain lions, bobcats, or foxes can make some weird sounds, but the timing and pitch were just wrong. Was it a prank? No one was out there but us, and we heard it from different spots around camp. Was it someone hurt? We never found footprints or signs of a person. I've never been so unnerved in the wilderness. If you've heard something like this in the Uintas or anywhere else, please share. I want to know that I'm not crazy. This happened a few years ago, and I still don't know how I didn't get mauled. I was camping in Great Smoky Mountains National Park with my partner Jess, and even though we both grew up in pretty cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods, we figured we were totally capable of handling a backcountry trip. Spoiler, we were not. Or rather, I was not. It was early fall, that sweet spot where the leaves are starting to change, but it's not freezing yet, and we'd been hiking around the park for a couple of days. Nothing extreme. Some easy trails, car camping, eating terrible trail mix, and occasionally arguing over the map. Neither of us had much real wildlife experience besides yelling at possums or doing the awkward, "Oh shit," walk around a goose blocking a sidewalk. We'd watched a couple of bear safety videos, had a can of bear spray neither of us had ever actually used, and for the most part, we kept food stored properly. Mostly. We were definitely not seasoned campers, but we were enthusiastic amateurs. The most dangerous part of the trip so far had been Jess almost face-planting into a stream trying to take a selfie. So, on our third night, we roll into this cozy, really quiet campsite tucked away a bit from the road. Not a soul around, just woods, misty hills and that, well, we really could die out here and no one would know kind of solitude. We set up the tent, stack firewood, and I'm in full dopamine mode because we'd saved some steaks for that night. Our little backwoods gourmet moment. We made one fatal mistake. We left the cooler next to the picnic table. We should have thrown it in the car or bear box, no question, but we were tired, hungry, and just wanted to walk down to the scenic little stream for golden hour photos. I figured we'd only be gone for 20 minutes. I told myself, it's fine, it's fall, bears are probably asleep or whatever. They are not. We hike down. It's pretty. The light is all orangey and perfect. We come back up the trail maybe 30 minutes later, and bam, there it is, a bear. Not a grizzly, thank God we're not out west, but a solid, shaggy black bear, just vibing in our camp like it owned the place. Snout in the air, nosing around the cooler. Didn't seem aggressive, but it sure as hell wasn't scared of us either. It was just chilling, checking out the menu. My brain basically crashed. Error 404, bear response not found. Jess freezes. I freeze. I've got this tiny camp axe in my hand. I'd been using it to split some damp wood before we left. And that's literally it. No spray, no noise. Just me, Jess, and one bear. And instead of remembering any of the actual bear safety advice like stay calm or back away slowly, my brain decides to focus on one thing, not the stakes. So, like a certified idiot, I step forward and yell, "Hey, hey, get out of here." The bear doesn't care. It's still sniffing around the cooler, probably amused. I take 2 more steps. Jess is now whisper screaming behind me. "What are you doing?" I raise the axe like I'm about to make the dumbest decision of my life. And I do. I walk up and bonked the bear on the nose with the flat side of the hatchet. Not a swing, not an attack, just a very dumb, very firm tap, like I was trying to reboot the bear with a software update. The bear jumps back maybe 3 feet. We lock eyes. For a second, I swear we both had the same thought. What the actual hell just happened? Then it huffs. That weird, snorty exhale that sounds half annoyed, half threatening. It turns around and ambles off into the trees like I just ruined its evening plans. No charge, no noise, just vibes disrupted. I stand there in stunned silence, axe still in hand, heart trying to beat its way out of my ribs. Jess looks at me like I've just proposed robbing a bank. What the actual fuck is wrong with you? Fair question, very fair. We didn't see that bear again. I assume it told its friends about the weird hairless raccoon that smacked it in the face and decided not to come back. We cleaned the cooler. Just a few muddy paw prints. Thankfully nothing inside torn up. And yes, we cooked the steaks. I won't lie, every bit tasted like guilt and adrenaline. Later that evening, we found a ranger station down the road and reported the bear. I left out the I tapped it with an axe part because, I like not being banned from federal land. The ranger didn't look surprised. Yeah, he said, they've been active lately. You're lucky it wasn't feeling bold. They usually don't want trouble. Which, thanks for the reminder, man. Jess didn't let me live it down for the rest of the trip. Anytime I even look at the axe, she says, "You gonna pick a fight, Bear Slayer?" Any rustle in the woods, she'll say, "You better go apologize to his cousin." She drew a dumb little cartoon of a bear with a band-aid on its nose in the corner of our map and labeled it Wounded Pride Estimated Location. I earned it. A few weeks later, I told the story to some friends expecting full judgment and got it, but they also lost it laughing. Now it's one of those stories people make me retell at parties, and honestly, I still think about that exact moment all the time. Me, holding that dumb axe like it meant something, stepping up to a 200-pound plus bear, and just giving it a polite little, "No thanks," tap on the nose. The sheer luck of it, like I was one bad mood away from getting swatted across the forest floor. If that bear had skipped breakfast or been nursing a grudge, I wouldn't be typing this. I'd be a cautionary sign nailed to a tree. What kills me is how calm the bear was about the whole thing. I didn't scare it. I just confused it, like I'd messed up some invisible rules of the forest. This hairless bipedal creature, really, with a glorified butter knife. And then it just decided not to press charges, I guess, probably out of pity. And yeah, it lives rent-free in my head, not because I think I'm brave, far from it, but because it was the dumbest possible survival move that somehow, miraculously, didn't get me turned into forest fertilizer. So yeah, if you're ever camping in the Smokies, or honestly, anywhere with bears, do not do what I did. I've spent a lot of time hunting and fishing alone, from my teenage years into my mid-20s. I'm no stranger to periods of isolation in the Appalachian Mountains, running through central Pennsylvania, or the woods of northern New York. However, there are certain times I'm overcome with feelings of anxiety, or just a flat-out feeling of, I shouldn't be here. This has almost exclusively happened in areas densely populated by hardwood trees, cedar, pine trees, spruces, etc. It's happened when scouting, fishing, and at times hunting with a very big, loaded firearm. It's not the same feeling you get when walking back to your truck after dusk with just a bow, 'cause New York hasn't approved your pistol permit yet. I can only describe it as a primal feeling of where I'm going isn't a good idea and I need to leave. I have been stationed at a light infantry unit for the last 6 years as an 11 Bravo. If you're unfamiliar, light infantrymen, me, are allotted opportunities for courses and field trainings in areas such as cold weather survival, land navigation, fieldcraft, heavy cross-country backpacking, rucking, mountaineering, and other forms of wilderness survival, all things required to be effective in a field environment. This means a lot of time in the woods, and some of that time is alone. Never once have I had these intense sensations as previously described while training in a professional capacity. I'm not scared of the woods. I'm well aware of what can happen to a person if they are careless to their environment. I like to think I know what I'm doing, and I know what to do to keep myself in all right shape. I say all of this to say this. Last Monday, I was back out of a patch of pine trees all the way back to my truck. By a feeling of intense dread and anxiety, I genuinely felt in that moment as if I was not supposed to be there, and if I continued forward, it would have meant some sort of bad news. This is a spot I've hunted before. The first time I met that same patch of trees with unease when passing through, but this time was too intense. I'm a religious individual, and to me, it felt like an intense evil was keeping an eye on me as I walked through its front yard. When this happens, it is consistently patches of tall, hardwood trees that do this to me. I like to think of myself as not beaten by a particular species of trees native to the Northeast, but unfortunately, it has become a pattern of occurrence I can no longer ignore. Is there something wrong with me? Why is it the trees? Is it my mind warning me to things I just can't understand at that particular moment? Any sort of input is welcome. I'm going back out in a couple of hours to sit for turkey. If anything else happens, I suppose I'll update. A few years ago, I was hiking the southern portion of the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington State, USA. It was late June, so warm enough that water sources were valuable. I made camp toward the end of the day in a mildly used site. It was a few feet off the trail, but not deep into the woods. The babbling brook was about 50 feet away. As I was heating water on my tiny stove for dinner, an older, about 60-ish man walked down the trail. He saw me and hollered to ask if I had any water. I noticed that he was wearing regular clothes. Jeans, sneakers, and a casual white button-down shirt. No pack. All odd. I was far enough down the trail, maybe 10 miles from any road, that a day hiker would have been extremely rare at that point. I welcomed him into my camp and gave him water from a jug. He drank it, thanked me, then walked on. I thought it was odd, and it stuck in my mind. The following week, I came off the trail to a nearby town and learned of a massive manhunt for a guy in his 60s, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a casual white button-down shirt. He had abandoned his car near the PCT and was on the run from the feds for money laundering and other white-collar crimes. I never did learn if they found him. I often wonder how far he got with no gear, no food, and no water. A small part of me hopes he got away.